You guys, it's Karen, and I thought I would do a video about DIY grooming basics, or tips and tricks if you like, but things that will help you in the whole process. And just talking about the general aspects of it, like whether you need to wash the coat, whether you need to brush it, that kind of thing. That I may have touched on in some of the other videos. I've also realised I haven't done a video on the tail, so I thought I had done all of them, but I haven't done the tail. I did film it twice, but for one reason and another it didn't go up, so I will definitely do a video on how to groom the tail for you. Okay, number one is wash the coat first and then brush it. Wash it, dry it, brush it. You may think that's an unusual order to do it in, or I certainly did when I started training. I thought that it would be, and when I dropped Watson off at the groomers, I thought they would clip him and then wash him and then dry him, because it made sense to me that they would be washing all of the little hairs away that they had clipped off. It made sense because his coat was awfully long, and why would you go to the effort of blow drying, you know, all that long hair that you were just going to clip off, and it would be much easier to blow dry short hair. And all of that is true. However, to use clippers on a dirty coat causes problems. It can cause the clipper to get kind of jammed up. You can catch the coat as you're clipping it, and it can pull on the skin of the dog, so it can cause the dog pain. And it's just not very good for the clippers to be clipping through a dirty coat. If you wash, dry and blow dry them, and brush them, you are just going to glide through the coat, and it will make the job of grooming, the job of clipping much easier. A lot of you guys know I'm now doing grooming tuition in the east of Scotland and teaching you how to groom your own dog in a one-to-one scenario. And I have said on my information leaflet that it is best if you wash your dog, but not essential, because I don't always wash, in fact I very rarely now wash Watson before I clip him. What I do is brush through. That's an absolute no, a deal breaker. Like, there's no argument about that. You have to brush your dog before clipping, because otherwise you'll just constantly be jerking through, and it will be hurting the dog. It will be frustrating to do, and it just won't work. As I explain in my information leaflet, and why I don't wash Watson every time, is because Watson is already washed once a week. Because he has to be bathed in a special shampoo for his allergies. So his coat is never going to be extremely dirty. If I knew he had been covered in mud, he would get washed anyway probably, and that would be the time I would use his special shampoo. And so the caveat is, if you've got a dog that hasn't been washed for months and has months of dirt built up, then you will need to wash them. If you have a dog that you generally wash once a week anyway, then it's not so important. So I hope that makes sense, but you are best to have a clean coat. Okay, number two is, and this is one I don't think people think is necessary, but once you use it, you realise how useful it is to use a restraint. You don't have to buy a special table, but you can. By the way, I'm going to list every product that I use in grooming. I'm going to put underneath this the description of this video, so you can just click on the link to get it for, I'll do it for UK and USA, and that includes a table with a double arm. So it's basically the table, and you can get, like I said, a separate arm that you could fit to, say, your dining table or an old table that you were using. I recommend getting the double one, so it means it's got two loops hanging from it. One is to go around the front of their neck, and the other one is to go around underneath their tummy right at the back. I've only got a single noose actually. I threw away my double one because I had stopped grooming. I don't necessarily need it for Watson, but I have to say, even after getting rid of it, I did miss it for Watson, because it's something that at the beginning of my grooming career, if you like, when I was training, I just thought, oh, I hate those things. They look terrible. I don't want to put something around somebody's neck. I don't really want to restrain a dog. I'm sure they'll be fine. But I'm afraid it's not like that, and it is something that's very useful. The way that it's useful is when you've got it around their neck, it doesn't have to be tight. You're basically stopping them looking down constantly. And the reason you don't want them to look down is when you're cutting towards the top of their legs, if they're looking down and you're scissoring, you could catch them. And so if you think about my videos or go and have a watch of them, you'll see that a lot of the time I'm just doing this constantly with Watson's head. I'm constantly moving his head up, and it never ever gets to the stage where he's holding his head up. I constantly have to hold it up. When I'm scissoring his legs, I've got one hand holding his head and I'm scissoring the front of his legs. So that's why you need the front one. The back one is basically to stop them sitting down, and that's where I could really use one for Watson as well, because when it gets to the point where I want to do his tail, he sits down. The top of his legs, his back legs, he sits down. And so I'm constantly lifting him up, I probably spend as much time lifting him up as I do cutting. And so I have now got, like I said, a noose, and I am going to use that, or a restraint. I don't like the word noose. So why do I say to get a double one? Because you can use a single one and use it at the front when you need to, and then use it at the back when you need to. The reason I say to get a double one is because it's just too big a risk. If you put it on their neck and something happens, say you've got children and one of the children screamed and had hurt themselves, or the doorbell goes and you forget that the noose is around their neck, they can fall off the table and break their neck like that. And so I just would never, I'm going to buy a double noose. The reason I've got a single, like I said, I don't like using noose restraint. The only reason I've got a single one is because I need it for these grooming tuitions, and there was only a single one that was able to be quickly delivered. I will now order a double one to replace my single one. You can still get a double one that attaches to a table, and so I would always recommend having the one underneath the back and the one on the neck. But obviously what you should do is take them all off. If the door goes, if an accident happens, whatever happens, you really should take them off, put the dog down on the floor. But actually when there's hair everywhere and you're in the middle of doing something and you know that it's going to be hard to get them back on the table, there is that temptation to just go and answer the door or answer the call of, you know, somebody that's calling you, etc., another dog perhaps, whatever. So that's why I recommend a double one, because I think then there's just less risk as long as you use both of the restraints. I have never ever left a dog in the groom room whilst it has been attached to restraints, because even with the one on the back, yes, there's less chance of them falling off, but you know, you just don't know what if the end of the table fell, and there's just no way you should leave a dog in restraints at all. And I actually noticed it in a video I was watching. Now I can't even remember the video, but it was a classroom full of people and there was a trainer talking and all the dogs were in their restraints, but one was sort of nearly slipping off the table and only had the one around his neck. And honestly, it was terrifying me. And they weren't paying attention, and like I said, it can happen so quickly. But the most I've been able to do is where they're in two restraints. I have, when people have come to, like for example, when I was grooming the dogs, my dog walker would come in to collect the dog. I would be able to poke my head out of the door because they were right there, and so, you know, I like within arm's length at least, but I wouldn't have even done that if they just had the noose around the neck. You know, I'm labouring the point here, I understand, but I'm just so terrified that this is going to happen to a dog. And it wouldn't, you know, like I said, it could kill it instantly, but not only that, if it didn't, it could traumatise it, it could cause it damage. It's just not what you want. Number 3 is, if at all possible, use a cordless clipper with 1 speed. I do consider myself to be a semi-professional groomer, even now. Because I did have my own grooming business, albeit for a very short time because of my joints, but I did many grooms over months. And I would not buy a 2-speed clipper because I don't feel there's any need for it unless you have your own shop and you are trying to get through 10 poodles in a day. Well, obviously you wouldn't ever do 10 poodles in a day, but the 2nd speed is really only for speed. It's if you really want to get a coat done very quickly and you're in a fast moving business. I don't feel like for personal grooming there's any reason to have a 2-speed clipper, and they actually recommend as a beginner you use the 1-speed one, because the 2-speed one, the blade can get extremely hot, and then if you forget about checking it, that's going to burn them. You need to do that with the 1-speed one anyway. With a 2-speed one, it's much easier to get it caught and tangled in the coat, for it to get hot. I think a 1-speed one is the best. And the reason I say cordless is because, again, I have a cordless one and a corded one. I bought the corded one first and realised that it was just something that's a difficult thing to do. It was adding something that was a bit of a challenge. And as soon as I got the cordless one, it was such a relief. So my corded one is literally just in case my cordless one breaks. But it means that you're moving around, but you've got to watch where the lead is going constantly. It does mean you need to charge batteries with the other two, but you've normally got 2 batteries with it, and so you can just put it back on the charging station. I haven't ever found one run out on me and me not have a spare battery. But again, that's why I did have the corded one, but it never ever happened. I never ever run out of batteries. It would run out and I'd be like, okay, I'll put another battery in. But it was, as long as you've got a fully charged battery, it will last you the full groom. And like I said, doing it with a cord limits where you have your table, because you need to be near a point, or you need to use then an extension cable. And like I said, it just means it's awkward to get to certain places because you're draping the lead across their neck or across their head. So it makes it more challenging for you and the dog. Number 4 is about training. Probably the biggest question that people have is, how did I get Watson to sit so nicely? And how do you train a dog to sit still? It's not something that can be cured in one sitting. With Watson, we started brushing him as soon as we got him home as a puppy. And so obviously if you have a rescue, then you've got a bigger challenge on your hands if you haven't had them since a puppy. And then we also sent him to the groomers at, I think, maybe 4 months old. I can't remember the exact age he was, so that he could experience the puppy experience and so he could be used to grooming, to being on a table. And so I think that pretty much did a lot of the training for me. I've continued the training in that he was he would stay on the table, but he was very wriggly and he didn't enjoy it. But I have used treats, and I think it's just about using treats. And if you can make it as positive an experience as possible, which was my ethos when I had my grooming business, was I wanted to change the way dogs felt about the groomers. I wanted to make it a nice experience. So on the arm that I said had the restraints on, I would put either liver paste or peanut butter, so that once they got on the table, that even if they can't get to it, there's the aroma, because with dogs, the anticipation of food is actually as nice for them as the actual food itself, which I think is an interesting little fun fact. But then they could look up and lick off the peanut butter once I moved the bar down to the length that I needed to, or the height that I needed it to be. And I would do that when I wanted to get under their chin and when I wanted them to put their head up, you know. So you can do things like that, but the idea is to gradually expose them to all of the tools and the table, etc. And if they really don't like it or are scared, then you need to do it very gradually. And you could do something as simple as put them on the table, get out the clippers, switch the clipper on and just give them chicken, then switch the clipper off, put it down, give them another piece of chicken and put them on the floor, you know. And then you increase it to showing them the comb. Then you can put the comb near their ear and give them a piece of chicken, and then put the clipper on and put it near their head and give them a piece of chicken. It's not a quick process, you know, to train them to really, like I said, almost enjoy it. I can't say enjoy, because I don't think there's many dogs that enjoy it. I did have a couple of dogs that I do believe enjoyed, one that enjoyed the blow dry and one that enjoyed the whole process and was falling asleep on me. Number 5 is about what you wear. And this will save you some, I wouldn't say heartache, but it will save you losing some socks or tops. Is to get a jacket. You'll notice in my videos I wear a jacket that hair just falls off, it doesn't stick to. And I would say it's a really good investment to get one of those jackets, because it just means you're not going to ruin or get hairs all over a top that won't necessarily come out, because you can wash things that have got hair on them but they won't ever completely be free of hair, and so you can just throw a jacket on. And the other thing I would say is don't do it in socks. If you do it in socks, you will just have to throw those socks away, because again they'll be covered in hair and the hair sticks right to them and you can't get the hair off. So I would say either do it in bare feet or wear shoes, you know, shoes that are not like trainers. I suppose you could wear trainers, but just something that's not going to let the hair stick to it. You could wear flip-flops or something like that, I suppose. Number 6, I've kind of already covered. I've said use lots of treats to keep the association throughout. So there's no point just giving them a treat at the beginning and of course say good boy, good girl all the way through. I don't know how much it means to Watson, but I do say that to him. I say that because he's not particularly a cuddly, seeking affection type of dog. But I think it's worth constantly saying to them, good boy, good girl, giving them treats. so that they don't, if at any point they think there's never going to be any more treats, then it becomes a chore to them, and then they might try and get off the table, and then the next time you go to do the groom they will be more resistant. So if you can make sure, just give them tiny little bits. It doesn't have to be a large bit. You know, I normally get one piece of pork and cut it into lots of tiny pieces, and then just every now and then it's a good boy and he gets a little bit. So you're just keeping the association that it's a good thing. Number 7 is to learn for signs of discomfort or pain from your dog, which might sound simple, but it depends how long you've had your dog, how well you know your dog. I've had Watson for over 2 years now, and I grew up with dogs, but I've learned so much more since owning my own dog and being responsible for him. And also I'm at that age where I've, you know, read books, done training, etc. And I'm learning, I feel like I learn something new about him every week, but there are certain signs that I didn't know were signs of discomfort and pain. And the 2 main things are if they turn around and look at you directly. And so, like I said, it's more important when you're brushing, because it could mean that if you're trying to get a mat out and you're pulling their skin to the point where it's hurting them, say you're at the back of them, they will turn around and look at you, and that's simply them. If they're looking at you, they're saying, you're hurting me. That's their way of telling you, saying this is hurting. So you need to ease up and be more gentle, or use a mat splitter, or cut them short, or shave it off and just accept there'll be a bald patch, you know. But taking mats out can be quite painful for a dog. Or if you're holding them in a certain way, you know, or doing something that they're just not happy with. The turning around and looking at you is normally that you're hurting them in a particular place. If they are anxious or unhappy about what you're doing, they will lick their lips. Now, obviously, you need to distinguish between licking their lips because they've just eaten some peanut butter or liver pate, but they do lick their lips when they're anxious. And I remember I really saw this in action with one particular dog that tried to bite me, and I knew that he was going to bite me because he was licking his lips. And I remember thinking, he's licking his lips, and I know that that's a sign of a dog that is anxious, and so I'm going to step back. And then he snapped, and he continued to do that. And so it's definitely, when they're licking their lips, it's a sign of, I'm feeling really anxious here, I don't know what you're doing, I don't like what you're doing. It doesn't necessarily mean they're going to bite. Not all dogs will go immediately from licking to biting, but it does mean that they're uncomfortable. So maybe in the training, when you're doing the training with them, realise that that is them at their limit, and you maybe need to do something to train them on that particular thing, or to get them more accustomed to the table or the clippers. You know, if it's when you switch the clippers on, then you need to do some more training with the clippers, maybe not in the room first, just sit in the living room with them, put the clippers on and give them a treat, etc, etc. Number 8, don't pull the skin when combing, brushing and clipping. Well, when clipping, you can kind of hold the skin above where you're putting the clipper. But what I mean is, if you are combing out mats, how can I demonstrate this? Basically, you need to, don't just get a comb and pull like this, comb through a mat. You need to make sure that you're holding the skin down to their body, and that you're just picking from the hair, but make sure you have your hands around the mat and are holding the skin. Because if you get the comb into a piece of a mat and then pull it like that, you're not only pulling the hair, you're pulling the hair that is then pulling the skin, and that can be very painful. You need to hold it flat against the skin so that all the force you're putting on is just getting out the mat. So you can hold the base of the mat so that the force is against the hair and against your fingers, not pulling the skin. I hope that makes sense. It's really hard to talk about and not demonstrate. I might have to maybe do a video about that and actually demonstrate what I mean. Oh, number 9, I have already mentioned this, but check the heat of the blades. If you are clippering, make sure that you check that they're not too hot, because you don't want to burn them, and they can very quickly heat up. Number 10, clean and oil your blades. It's really, really important. I'm not somebody that's very good at maintenance. I am forever being told by my husband, have you checked your tyres? Have you pumped up your tyres? And it's something I always go, oh, I'm sure it'll be fine. I just don't like doing it, and it's not very good. But with clippers, I've been really good, because I know from the training that if you don't oil your blades, then you're going to have to fork out for a new pair of clippers or new blades or whatever. You know, you need to make sure you oil your clippers and clean them afterwards, take all of the hair out, and your scissors as well, if possible, oil them as well. The final, number 11, the final thing to tell you about is handling. And there's probably a lot more than this I could talk about, but there's a couple of things that you need to remember. One of them is when you pick up their foot for the first time, they're going to pull it away. They're instantly just going to pull it away. And this is a piece of advice I didn't love at first because it felt mean. I'm such a big softie with dogs that when I used to watch videos of dogs being groomed, I didn't like the videos. I felt that a lot of them, I don't know, I just didn't like watching it. But a lot of it I've learned from experience is necessary for the safety of the dog. And when you pick up their foot and they pull it away, the more that battle happens, so you pick up their foot, they pull it away, you pick it up again, they pull it away. The more that happens, the more difficult it will be to get them to understand that when you pick up their foot, they're not going to win the battle. And so what they teach you to do is you pick that foot up, and you know that when you pick that foot up, you hold it tightly. Obviously, don't hurt them. You hold it tightly and you do not let go. And you make sure that you do not let go. Because you need to get to a point where you can pick that paw up and they know that there's no point, keep pulling it back, keep pulling it back. Because that could cause them to constantly be jerking all of their limbs, their head, their eyes, their ears, whatever you're holding and trying to cut, and that could injure them. And so if you can get that message to them without words, just when I pick up your paw and hold it, or when I hold your tail or your ear, you're not going to be able to pull away from it. Don't pull them, just hold it firmly. Then they get the message that you're in control and that they have to sort of surrender, and that they're okay. It also gives them a bit of confidence. Well, okay, I have no choice here. I give them my hand, it's all going to be okay. I don't need to keep pulling away. It just makes it so much easier. I have definitely found that over the grooms. If I can do that immediately, hold their foot and just make sure that I don't let them pull it away that first time, then they're not quite as resistant going forward. It's taken a while with Watson because I did initially hold it so loosely that he'd pull it away, you know. Whereas now I don't need to hold it so firmly because he knows there's no point in keep pulling because I'm going to hold it. So that's one thing. There's a foot trick I think I did show when I was doing the legs and the feet, that if they won't leave their foot on the floor and you need to cut around their foot, you just lift up the other foot and then you can get access to the foot that you need to. Things to remember are to protect their eyes. Remember when you're cutting around the face, try and sort of have a shield over their eyes if possible, so they're not getting little bits of hair in their eyes, because that would be extremely sore. I haven't really spoken about the washing and brushing aspect, but with washing you can put cotton wool balls in their ears to protect them from getting water in them, because that wouldn't be very good either. The end of the ear, obviously you need to always hold the end of the ear so that you're not actually going to cut into their ear. And then the things to remember as you're kind of clipping and cutting are nipples on both boys and girls. Check for nipples, that some have more than others. I don't know how the whole anatomy works on dogs. I'm really quite confused by it all with the nipples and with the dew claw situation, because Watson has a dew claw, sort of say his dew claw is there, then a little bit further up is a sort of pad, almost like a dew claw pad, but it's so far away from the dew claw it seems to have nothing to do with it, but it's on both sides. And then some dogs have dew claws on their back legs as well. So just know your dog and where their nipples and dew claws and dew pads etc are, so that you avoid, and of course little winkies as well. You know, you don't want to just be looking underneath and grooming away. You need to make sure you've got your hand over their area so that you don't injure them. I would just say when you're doing the grooming, before you do any scissor cut, before you clip, just constantly think, what if they move? You know, what if they flick around? There's been so many times Watson's done that and even does it now, and I'm like, Watson, you know, they're so unpredictable, and just remember that, and so try to be that little bit extra careful with them. That's everything to tell you today. I hope that this was useful for you. Please do let me know if you have any questions at all about grooming, anything to do with equipment or how you do something, etc. I would be delighted to answer your questions if I can. I will do a video on the tail, and if there's any other videos that you would like me to do, then let me know. But like I said, I think I've covered most things. So that's everything. Thank you very much for watching, and I will speak to you again soon.